have the Liberals been attacking One Nation? Again, not that I've seen, but they did put out a flyer about independence to try to discourage people from voting for independence, and they're saying one's been charged with domestic violence, one's been jailed for fraud. What they didn't put on the flyer is these were former Liberals.
Well, at least they had the courage to get rid of them in the first place. Maybe.
No, they left on their own.
A lot of them resigned, yeah.
Hi, Social Democrats. It's Stephen here. We want to get to know you better. So we've launched the Socially Democratic Listener Survey. It's just 15 quick questions and will only take about 3 minutes to complete, and it's completely confidential. And as a thank you for doing so, anyone who completes the survey will go into the draw to win a trip to Adelaide for the 2026 ALP National Conference, which is happening in July this year, including return domestic flights and accommodation. If you are from Adelaide, then we're going to fly you to Melbourne for one of our live shows leading up to the Victorian state election. Now, if you're from overseas, obviously we can't include international flights and accommodation, but we still want to get your feedback and complete the survey as well, because your input is super, super important to us as a member of our overseas listening audience. To take part in this listener survey, just click the link in this episode's show notes and let us know everything that is important to you in terms of your podcast, Socially Democratic. Thanks. The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people and organisations who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in your world in 2026, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. If you want to join those wonderful supporters of our podcast and financially support our show so we can continue to produce great episodes each week, then we encourage you to click on the link in the show notes and subscribe to the Patreon of Socially Democratic. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. All right, we are taping this one on a Tuesday evening on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. Rarely do I do a podcast actually in the evening, and so I thought I would crack a beer, and I intentionally went down to the bottle shop and got a Cooper's Pale Ale just to get in the mood for today's episode. It's the South Australian election. This is our weekly recap that we're going to be doing all the way up until election day and one after the election is over. And to help me recap each week that is the South Australian election and who will be spending the next 4 weeks with me are two wonderful comrades over in SA, starting with Matt Clemow, who you will remember from our marathon federal election battleground seats episode that went for 3.5 hours. But when he's not on the podcast helping me talk about South Australian politics, he's a senior consultant at Capital. And before that, he was a media advisor and a chief of staff in successive South Australian Labor governments. Matt, welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Thank you for having me.
And rounding out our weekly panel, she's the executive director for MacLeod South Australia, and prior to that had over a decade of experience working for federal and Northern Territory Labor politicians. And she's bringing the vibes to today's episode because their offices are on Rundle Mall, and I think we can hear the Adelaide Fringe in the background. Hannah MacLeod, welcome to Socially Democratic. Very topical, given that election week happens at a time in Adelaide when Adelaide comes alive, because you've got the Fringe and you've got Clipsal. The weather is wonderful this time of year, and obviously there is a festival of democracy in South Australia every 4 years in March. So I'm looking forward to spending the next couple of weeks with you guys as we sort of unpack what's going to be a really exciting race, and we'll make it exciting even if it might seem like Labor's got it in the bag. I think there's still a lot of democracy to go before we get to the 21st of March. But for the folks at home that aren't really across South Australian state politics, let's talk about the state of the race. There are 47 seats in the House of Assembly. Obviously, you need 24 to win government. Labor currently is in government with 29 seats. The coalition has 13. They need 11 to win, and there are 5 independents in the lower house as well. There was a redistribution, as there is traditionally in South Australia after every single election, and the seats of Dunstan and Black, which I think Labor picked up both in by-elections after we won. Yeah. Cressida O'Hanlon in Dunstan and Alex Dighton. Hello, Alex, good friend of mine. In Black, they have become notionally Liberal again. Dunstan on 1% and Black on 2%, so 27 seats notionally for Labor. Recent polls, there was a news poll done about a month ago. They only did primary. They had Labor on 44, One Nation on 24, the Liberals on 14, the Greens on 12, and Other on 6. And we're not prepared to do a two-party preferred because of the vote for One Nation. Gutless. YouGov, however, did do one, and they did a two-party preferred for Labor Liberal, which would be 59-41 for the good guys, and they did a two-party preferred against One Nation, which was 60-40 our way. And also there's some sort of leadership and approval ratings out of that news poll. Peter Malinauskas, the Premier of South Australia, has got a satisfaction of 67%. That's a net plus 40. Ashton Hearn, who's the Liberal leader, has got a satisfaction of 39% and a net positive 4. And Malinauskas leads Hearn by 67-19 on preferred Premier. Okay, there's all the stats. One thing I actually falls out of that, and I actually we're interested in both of your thoughts on this One Nation primary that we're seeing coming out of South Australia, before Christmas or maybe early in the year, that first national poll that saw One Nation's primary substantially higher than what it was at the federal election. Everyone was like, oh, wow. But then thinking, well, that won't translate into states like South Australia or Victoria. And then obviously the first couple of polls came out in SA and it has translated to that. Where are we seeing this come from? Yeah, where is this geographically? Where do you think this is coming from? I'll go to you, Matt, first of all, and then I'll come to you, Hannah.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the first thing to talk about is it's been an upper house campaign by One Nation here. So in terms of where their presence is, Pauline Hanson came down and announced Corey Bernardi as the replacement number one candidate on the Legco ticket, going on above the guy that was already previously there. I think if you look at where the primary sits, it's essentially a drawing away from where the Lib vote would normally be in those regional seats. If you look at the individual polling that's been done in the seats like the southeast, you've essentially got One Nation plus the Libs equaling the 45 that they should be. So I think in that sense, you can see it as being a part kind of Lib protest vote. When you look at the state primary results and look at, is that playing out in more Labor strongholds in the south and the north? The only real guide we have to that is how little of that vote held up in the last federal election. Those two safest Labor seats kind of ended up at a 10% One Nation vote and a One Nation one and a 9% in the south. So, I think what we're seeing is a huge parked Lib vote, as well as the old kind of difference between who you say you're going to vote for compared to who do you vote for when you actually walk in. And at this stage, there's an empty seat on the ticket in all those lower house seats.
That's interesting. I wonder if this is probably a good opportunity to talk about the uniqueness of South Australian elections and the South Australian electorate. There has always been a non-Labor, non-Liberal streak in South Australian politics. It's the birthplace of the Australian Democrats. It's where Xenophon Party for a couple of election cycles terrified us a little bit. Family First was born out of South Australia. Hannah, do you think that this is just a lot of those types of voters going, you know what, I'm just going to go with One Nation at the moment when I get polled, but where I actually cast my vote, to the point that Matt just said, I'll make my mind up when I walk into the poll?
Yeah, that's what I think. I think you're right. South Australia's always had this third party, and you need to also note that South Australia doesn't have a national party. So I think that plays a part of it as well. We often see quite strong independents or minor parties going quite successfully in the regions traditionally. So and that seems to be the One Nation vote is tracking here like it is elsewhere. It's picking up on that outer suburban sort of, anti-liberal vibe at the moment. But I do think a bit of the vote will come back to the Liberal Party when it takes time to put the pencil to the ballot paper. I don't think they'll get as high. And I should also note we have had a One Nation upper house member. She quit the party within this term of Parliament, and she's now started her own party. But we already elected a One Nation member to our upper house. If their vote tracks, they probably will elect two to the upper house. So it's not insignificant, but it's not going to, by any stretch, massively shake up how the next term of Parliament will run.
Matt, we're going to talk about campaign strategy a bit more in detail later on, but while we're on sort of polling and the randomness that these polls are throwing up in terms of impact in strategically how you're going to campaign, does it mean that there's now going to be almost three cornered contests in a lot of these regional seats between the Liberal Party, the Independent and the Greens, and then therefore keep those candidates a bit busy, whereas Labor can just focus on the seats that they either need to hold or the ones that they want to pick up on their target seat list?
Yeah, I think if you go back to 2018 first and kind of use that Xenophon example, 14 weeks out, so it was December 17th, 2018, Xenophon was polling north of 30 and only had about 10 lower house candidates. They then fielded, I think, 30 lower house candidates, ended up not getting above 20% anywhere, but then still getting two people elected upstairs. I think the difference between that is the terrifying part of the Xenophon vote was quite easy to preference him second, and that's why I think all the preference here has been, all the kind of debate here has been, One Nation may be polling 30, they probably need to poll 45 primary in order to be winning a lower house seat if they get stranded without any preferences coming from anywhere else. In terms of what you talk about regional seats, I think that probably existed before the One Nation vote came. So if you look at the last election, there are 4 current former Liberals who are sitting as independent for a whole array of criminal charges and convictions and a whole lot of other things. There were 3 other very strong Conservative teals, for want of a better word, and I say that kindly, who got very close in those safe regional seats last time. And I think now, so I was in Port Lincoln last week, there are 2 pretty high-profile independents. There's there's a One Nation candidate who's not overly well known, but it is where Cory Bernardi's campaigning from. And then there's a sitting Lib MP who should be on a 20% margin. He might run 4th on primary up there because you have this Conservative vote splitting so many ways above independents and everything else. Happy to get into the candidates later, but you've got more than 4 right alternatives to the Libs in almost every what would be their kind of safer seats.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
That is nuts.
So there were the 320 odd candidates across the 47 seats at the last election. There's more than 450 this time. There's about 30 seats with more than 9 candidates. And in most of those seats, you've got a Lib, a One Nation, a Family First, and an Australian Family, and a couple of other right groups as well. So we could end up with 4- and 5-way contests in areas where Labor plus Greens is only ever going to be 30% anyway.
Let's. What I want to do now is I want to talk about the leaders, and then we'll move on to sort of the 2 campaign narratives of the 2 major parties. Let's start with the leadership, though, first of all, and start with our guy, Peter Malinauskas, the Premier. Matt, how would you summarise Malinauskas' first term as leader and the kind of leadership style he's brought to the job?
I think on any kind of measure, extraordinarily successful. I think coming from to opposition, kind of like what that Victorian Andrews government was after only one period out from what was a long-term government before that. I think there's no doubt that this has been a new government. It's not been a continuation of what those former governments were. There have been significant steps away from previous policy when it comes to greenfields housing and water utility charging and those kind of things. I don't think we can step away from the fact the guy's a generational talent as a starting point. But in terms of being bold, I think they've utterly stamped what their government stands for and be willing to take on some fights. I think probably once we talk about the campaign more, I think there's probably a little bit more surprise that there's no resting and just winning and moving on. I'd argue that the campaign commitments at 60-40 have been bigger than what the campaign commitments were at 48-52.
Hannah, I don't know if you had a chance to read. There was a long-form article in the Australian Financial Review on the weekend about Malinauskas. I know that normally we were joking before we got on air, like when we do a Tory with a typewriter, but maybe we'll need to include like the Labor version of a Labor comrade with a typewriter, because it was a great article for Malinauskas. And went into a lot of detail about his background and his history and his family and his time in the trade union movement. But I was struck by some of the similarities between Peter and Daniel Andrews, particularly in some of the things he said around. Malinauskas talked about political capital. Says it isn't like financial capital, something you can keep in the bank. You have to spend it prudently and make it grow. And Daniel Andrews on this very podcast said that I'm not in this job to keep others out. I'm in this job to get work done. And there's a whole bunch of other parallels you can draw between the two of them, not just their fashion sense as well. They both took the open shirt, blue jacket, jeans, and Rossi moleskin boots to a new level. But I mean, who do you think that Mally is kind of basing a lot of his leadership style on? He's like a modern social democrat that I think a lot of leaders around the world could take a look at and go, how do we bottle that?
I'll tell you what, he looks a lot better with his shirt off than I'm sure Dan Andrews does. So
that is where the comparison definitely separates. I think Daniel would agree on that.
Malinauskas is a proud moderate. He's absolutely centrist to his bone. I think if he wants a comparison, he would say he's imitating Paul Keating. He's very pro-business without being anti-worker. He really walks that fine line and balances them both. I've never met a more pro-business, or a premier that's liked so much by business. And when they say, you talk to a property developer or a business leader, and they'll say, we like the Malinauskas style of the Labor Party, and that they actually will caveat with his name. So his greatest fear going into the previous election when he was elected was that nobody knew who he was. He had a very low recognisable rate, and that certainly isn't the case now. Puff pieces in the AFR. He was the face of the now nationwide social media ban that's now ricocheting internationally as well. He's big, bold, very charismatic, obviously very popular.
What do you think has enabled him to build such a strong brand in South Australia amongst voters? I mean, one of the things that sort of came out of the article was that he was very sporty, and I actually thought that was a bit patronising. I appreciate that he brought back the Clipsal, and I certainly know how important that was to Adelaide when it used to be there when I lived in Adelaide. Plus the Livs golf is obviously pretty big. I do understand you've stolen a billy cart race from Victoria in recent days from some guy called Phillip Island. I'm not aware of this, but very good. And obviously the gather round for the AFL. But surely there's more to Malinauskas than just getting a whole bunch of sporting events in South Australia. What else do you think is I'm going to you, Hannah, first, then I'll go to you, Matt. What do you make of it?
When I finished high school, the question wasn't, what are you going to do? It was, where are you going? Are you going to go to Melbourne or are you going to go to Sydney? Potentially you might stay and do uni here, and then you're off. Then you're off on a plane to the East Coast. I think what Mally's captured isn't that he's got AFL rounds here for one weekend. He's made Adelaide, he's made South Australia a city that you're proud to live in and be. And it's not just the fringe. It's March here. It's Mad March. It's a great month in Adelaide, and the rest of the year was pretty light on. He's now with these events. There's something happening every single month. It's definitely buzzing, and we can see that population trend is reversing. It was helped along by COVID, I do have to say. A lot of young people who couldn't afford a house in Sydney or Melbourne did start to look back towards Adelaide, but now people are happy to say they're from Adelaide. So I think that's why people really like him.
And don't forget about the Christmas pageant in December as well. It's obviously something that's always on the calendar. Matt, what do you make of Mally's leadership in terms of the style that he has set out in his first term?
Yeah, I think Hannah's right. Kind of in a generational sense, like we're the tail end of the trauma of the state bank, and I think all of the we don't deserve nice things, we can't have nice things, and kind of there was a huge part of the Random Weatherall government was kind of the air warfare destroyers and all that kind of stuff. It was about South Australia winning. I think that's not uncommon in politics. I think with the Premier, you've got someone who people want to win and want to get in behind whilst he is winning. And I think if you look at kind of a lot of the early commentary, particularly in kind of a hotels association, hospitality association and that kind of stuff, the Premier was enormously overt that a lot of these initiatives were thanking them for still being alive after COVID, and it was for having them do that heavy lifting. Now, that's also an extraordinary way to steal what is the Conservatives' biggest business base and have them as your greatest fan at the same time. But I think what's so clear about his leadership is the overtness of the decisions that he makes. Like, I think it's not we're doing this and here a justification. It's we're doing this, and to people who don't like it, I'm explaining to you why I'm doing it. That also only happens when you have personal capital to spend, and he has that in spades because of who he is.
And if he gets a result on the 21st, you'll have more political capital to spend going into the next term as well. But let's not count our chickens before they've hatched. Let's talk about his opponent, Ashton Hearn, who I don't know anything about this person. She came into the leadership in December. I didn't even know that had happened. She's styled as a moderate. She's young, but no one's really sort of heard of her. Hannah, what do you know about Ashton Hearn?
Yeah, you're not the only one that doesn't know about her, Stephen. South Australians don't know about her. She's in her first term. She only got into Parliament in 2022. She's from the Barossa, which is about an hour's north of Adelaide. Really good wines from there. It's sort of that country, but not too far from the city. So really good mix for her. But she wasn't expecting to be leader and then anybody else was. So this is their third leader this term. They started off with David Spears, who was convicted of drug charges. Then they moved on to another guy who was a bit of a flop. So following lots of polling, she was instilled in December, about a week before the Bondi massacre occurred. So it's been a really bumpy ride for her. She's got a 1-year-old son. She's married to a former Liberal staffer as well, so very political household. She, like a lot of moderates here in South Australia, was a Pine staffer, and she was Premier Stephen Marshall's Director of Media and Comms. So she's a real career politician. And if you were to ask me, she's an absolutely outstanding opposition leader. It's just the wrong time for her. If it was in a couple of terms' time, I think she would be brilliant, but it's the wrong time. I just wanted to note a couple of things she did as soon as she was leader were to come out repealing the state's First Nations voice to Parliament and to wind back our net zero target. So although she's a moderate, she's obviously responding to what's happening in the electorate, and she's moving to the right.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because it's a similar thing that is going to happen or is sort of happening a little bit here in Victoria with the new Liberal leader here as well. She too is from the so-called moderates of the party, but the numbers that got her elected in the caucus are from the hard right. And then obviously we're seeing the rise of One Nation in the polls. How does she respond to this moment and try and get her party back in the game? Matt, what do you think if you were advising her strategically? How are you going to try and thread this needle?
Quit your job, Matt.
Certainly not. I've probably been surprised in a campaign theme sense the kind of restraint that they've had. Like, if you're 60-40 down and you're fighting One Nation from the other side, there must be a particular desire to just swing for the fences and promise every person in the street whatever they want and see if you can kind of save some of those regional seats. There's been a undoing of previous commitments that people probably didn't know about, but they were probably vaguely popular through the lens of economic restraint. I think Treasurer Coots and Tonus is occupying some space rent-free in various policy discussions as only he can be so good at. But also I think the other overarching thing, and kind of Hannah spoke about the Bondi massacre before. There's been no oxygen. That even if she was promising $1,000 to every person in the street, it's probably the fourth story on the news that night. You've got an extraordinarily popular premier, really significant world events, and the circus of Corey and Pauline Hanson, and there's a former Adelaide Crows captain running for the Legco, and all these individual things are just eating up space. I got a message from someone last night. The first state politics story was 14 minutes into the news last night, 19 days left in the campaign. That's an impossible situation for someone who's been leader for 100 days at the lowest ebb of their federal party.
Yeah, it's tough being the media advisor in that campaign. Well, maybe it's a good time to talk about messaging. And how I want to do this is I want to break it up in terms of one of those old message boards. What is Labor saying about themselves and what are they saying about the opposition? And then what are the Libs saying about themselves and what are they saying about the opposition? Matt, let's go to you first and do the Labor column. What's Labor saying about themselves in this campaign?
So, everything's through the broader lens of it's not time to change. We need to keep on going. The actual wording of it is every kind of ad. So positive ad campaign starts with it's been a busy 4 years, and kind of the negative campaign is here's what the Libs have been doing during those 4 years. But then the push on from the it's been a busy 4 years is it's not time to slow down. It's time to build on our state's momentum. So not enormously dissimilar to the RAND campaign that David Feeney ran in 2006 in terms of we have done this already, here's what we're going to do next. Whilst you're flying as high as both those campaigns are, I don't think that's of any surprise. I would say, as I said before, that I think the depth of the campaign commitments have been really significant for a party that's 60-40 with an opposition on its knees. This isn't coasting into winning some other seats. I think we'll kind of talk about it later, but this is kind of West Wing, Bruno, let's have the whole kind of chessboard kind of areas.
Nice callback. And what are they saying about the Tories though? What's our contrast message against the Libs?
The campaign ad is the first leader got caught on drug supply charges. The second leader had focus groups that enormously unfairly said that he looked like Dracula. They now have a third leader, but it's 100 days in and they're in absolute shambles. There's been some mid-level leaks during the campaign, which is kind of all those things that reinforce the enormous problem that the SA Libs have had since the early 70s now. Ashton's campaign has had to face every single bit of that with far less bench kind of depth than any of her predecessors have had.
I'll just jump on to what Labor's saying about Liberals. One additional thing is this week they haven't ruled out a preference still of One Nation. So basically any time Malinauskas has an opportunity, they're cozying up to One Nation, definitely using that as a negative against them. In terms of what the Liberals are saying about themselves, I think they're reading a room a little bit wrong. They're focusing on three key pillars: affordability, health and crime. Affordability definitely are onto winning with that one, but they're not running with it. On health, again, they're basing this focus on health because Malinauskas and Labor were elected with a promise to fix ambulance ramping, essentially when people are stuck in an ambulance waiting to get into the hospital, which hasn't eventuated. But as you would both know, health is a Labor strong point. Malinauskas has done a lot on health. He's owned not being able to deliver on his promise, so they're focused on that. And then crime, I have to say, is right down there on the issues board of South Australians' minds. I think I saw a topic polling on it, and it's about number 10 or 11. So they're their focus. I think they about what they're saying about Labor. They said in the leadership debate last week, if you're happy with the direction of how the state's going, well, then go ahead and vote Labor. So that just sums it up. They're just in their own bubble. They just think, I honestly don't know how they can look at the polls, see the popularity, and come out with a line like that.
Oh, that's so bad. Just cut that up and that's a 10-second ad.
I saw on an ad on the Labor Party's Instagram page. That's how I actually saw that soundbite.
Love it. And added into that, can or are the Liberals trying to say anything about One Nation? Because if they're in these three-cornered contests against independence and One Nation, are they trying to formulate any kind of argument to say to people thinking about flirting with One Nation that they should stick with the Liberal Party?
I've not heard any of the kind of in-depth local kind of messaging around that. I think I'd probably answer that to say, I think Campaign Office probably changes its mind every 10 minutes. That are they going to do a deal because there are 4 regional seats that they can't stand to lose to independents for another 3 terms, or do they not? Hannah was saying before, so the Premier's messaging, and they've used Minister Blair Boyer to kind of be the campaign spokesperson on this stuff on the way through. And everything is so overt, saying there is no way they would go in the face of what John Howard did. John Howard stood to One Nation. There is no way that Ashton Hearn is going to overturn 30 years of decency and do a deal to save their skin. Like, it's been relentless. I think where the polls are now, there's almost an argument that there's actually no benefit in them in doing the One Nation deal anyway, particularly when One Nation's ability to do how-to votes in those regional areas, let alone postal votes, that we can talk about afterwards, it'll be inconsequential anyway. Like, it probably doesn't have the benefit to them. But, I would have thought they'd be changing their mind every time they look at another horrible poll.
Just before, when you were saying have the Liberals been attacking One Nation, again, not that I've seen, but they did put out a flyer about independence to try to discourage people from voting for independence. It was one of those old school claw machines, and they said, here's your unlucky dip. And they're saying these independents out of these 2 have joined Labor's cabinet. One's been charged with domestic violence. One's been jailed for fraud. What they didn't put on the flyer is, these were former Liberals. They're not onto a good thing with that one, and that got mocked openly in the Adelaide's Advertiser.
Well, at least they had the courage to get rid of them in the first place. Maybe there's positive.
No, they left their own.
A lot of them resigned. Yeah.
Two of them left before they were charged. Oh man! All right, great. Sorry, I was going to say, the question about what target audience is ultimately going to decide the outcome. I hate this question because it's just so lazy about sort of demographics as destiny. But if you're looking at the Labor campaign's policy offerings, who do you get a sense of who they're trying to connect with to say, hey, we've got your interests at heart. You should vote for us. Hannah, do you want to grab that first and I'll go to you, Matt?
Broadly, families and younger, I would say they came up with a policy for boomers to downsize their housing. They've come out with an extraordinary policy to abolish public school fees, which, again, lots of, oh, there you go, lots of health, lots of early education policies definitely aimed at those. I think they're kind of never mind the boomers. Let's focus on the younger people.
Matt, it's an older electorate, South Australia. I think it's the second oldest electorate in the country. It's interesting they've taken that decision to just ignore the boomers. I mean, I've always come from the school of thought that if you're a boomer, you've already made up your mind who you're voting for because you've been voting for that party probably now for 50 years. But is that a risk?
I think it's probably just that first sign of that generational change. I mean, would that have happened in 2010 or 2014? Absolutely not. But if you look at the federal infrastructure that sits under these state seats now, having had such an extraordinary outcome last May, if you look at the divisiveness of the federal Libs, particularly on gender as much as anything else, you're just not playing with the same deck as you were last time. I would say to Hannah, absolutely, that it's been a family and cost of living where it can suit you. And Labor has a 52% female cabinet and even more in a caucus sense. So, that's a very natural message compared to the Libs who have 2 women in the lower house. But I think also probably more interestingly, there's been targeting into new areas. And when we talk about seats, Labor's campaigning in seats that they haven't campaigned in since the 60s and 70s. And it's been, overtly saying, you've always been our people. We're just back talking to you now. Because we think you have faith in what we've done in these last 4 years.
That's a good time to turn to campaign strategy. And I think before we talk about sort of the strategy of the campaign more broadly, I think we kind of need to discuss these new laws that have been introduced in terms of funding of campaigns. So bear with me for a couple of seconds while I pretend I'm a lawyer. So the new laws introduced a ban on political donations to political parties, candidates, members of parliament and third parties. Instead, parties and individuals will receive public funding, which uses administrative funding for political parties, limited to non-political use, advanced funding for parties' participation in elections. If you're a non-incumbent candidate or a newly registered political party, then you're exempt from the ban on donations and can access advance payments to help with campaign expenses. Third-party groups, including businesses, trade unions, think tanks, have an expenditure cap of $450,000 during the election campaign. I'm interested in the time frame of what that is. I'm sure there are more to it than that, and Hannah, you've probably got your head around this way better than I do, but how does this factor into SA Labor's campaign strategy when allocating their financial resources? And if there's anything I've missed that should be named, please feel free to tell us.
Yeah, sure. So this is huge. This is, I think, the first place worldwide that has banned political donations. It's getting a lot of traction everywhere else. People wouldn't even know about it in South Australia. Your average voter wouldn't know. For Labor and the strategy, it's not a terrible strategic. We've always had boots on the ground. We've always had the people, always had that campaign discipline. The South Australian Labor Party is notoriously an absolute party machine when it comes to campaigns. What it does, of course, do is make targeting all that more relevant. And in an election where we're not just seeking to hold seats but pick up seats, that becomes really relevant. But again, they run a tightly oiled machine with this. It's going to, of course, affect the Liberal Party enormously, who get those big donations from previously from companies such as Cooper's Brewing. So you're okay to drink it today because they no longer can donate to the South Australian Liberal Party.
Can I point out, though, that the Cooper's family were the second highest donors to the Liberal Party? The highest was Clemow. And Clemow are the people that make all your switches in your house work. So I used to always retort by saying, well, you're going to go in your house and pull out all your power points and live in the dark for the next 20 years until I stop donating to the Liberal Party. No, you're not. So I'm going to drink this Cooper's Power because it tastes amazing. Sorry, Hannah, back to you.
That's okay. The premier drinks are West End beers, so unfortunately not brewed locally anymore, but we'll put that to one side as well. What the donation laws will do is affect new entrants. So we've got One Nation running a candidate in every single lower house seat. Is this because they think they can win? No, but the more they essentially, it's a public funding model. They get dollars per vote, so you're better off to run and get as many votes as you possibly can, because that adds up to dollars in the next election.
And I understand that the Labor Party won't be spending any money on Stobie Pole corflutes this time around. Thank God. How happy are campaigners that they don't have to get up at friggin' midnight and then run around their electorate on the back of a ladder chucking up campaign corflutes on Stobie Poles?
No, it certainly helps. Now we just have to, ask everyone to put it in their front yard and on their apartment building and everything else. Adding to what Hannah said, I think there's a big kind of structural piece to this as well. So this is a transitionary phase for the public funding for the first election as well. So there's essentially a guess on what you could forward borrow and what your cap can be, and then it's the primary votes at this election that then set what happens post that. So not only is Labor's entry into regional areas where we would have previously maybe had 12% primary and we'll get 25% this time, at the same time as every One Nation vote taken away from the Libs in a primary sense, that has a double dollar impact for the next election campaign. So in a structural sense, I've done some rough kind of spreadsheet messing around. The Libs on current polling could lose 80 of the 400,000 primary votes they had last time. That's 20% of campaign public funding. Even before you take into account that probably 10, 15% of that has gone to your opponents for next time, when they've got, at this rate, at least 30 more electorate officers than you, as well as you've only got 2 federal EOs, in the far north and the far south. Like, these things are extraordinary structural things that will have a decades-long impact, rather than just what the primary is on March 21.
Do you think that these donation restrictions and this public funding arrangement will alter the way that the Labor Party in particular, allocates its resources in terms of the things that cost money to run a campaign? Obviously, staff is expensive. Field organisers is one of the things that's one of the biggest parts of the Victorian budget, for example. But obviously then there's digital advertising, direct mail, TV advertising, high vis, all that kind of stuff. How do we get a sense, Hannah, how they're adjusting to these new conditions?
This time around, T-shirts, were one of the first things to go. So a volunteer wearing a T-shirt isn't changing a vote. Just wear a red T-shirt that you've got from home. It's little things like that. More broadly, the impact of the Labor Party is that now there's no fundraisers. There's no quiz nights to attend in the lead up to the election. There's no corflutes on Stobie Poles, as you've alluded to, which is a gruel, but it's a bonding experience. It's excitement in building up to the election. The party has considered this. They're now doing these campaign launches. There's been campaign launches done for individual seats as well as the overall one, to try to bring a bit of that camaraderie. But I definitely think that's something on the Labor side to be mindful of with these new laws, to make sure that you're engaging with party members, because you're not going to get those incidental fundraisers that you used to.
Matt, let's talk about geography. Where is Labor's? We always talk about the pathway to victory, which is the exact amount of seats you need to win government. But obviously, I feel like there's an expansion program going on here for the Labor Party. Are there any seats where the party are like, we need to keep that we currently hold that we need to keep an eye on, or is it actually they're in a space of not aware what territory can we pick up at this particular election?
I think there's probably a couple of seats where just the last election result was a bit quirky. There was a local mayor and there were a couple of independents, and I think they probably, if there was any nervousness at all, it would be in the quirks of last time as opposed to everything else. I think probably what is most extraordinary this time is South Australian state politics is kind of won and lost on this northeastern axis and this southwestern axis. So you've essentially got Adelaide, which is Lucy Hood, federal Adelaide, and then go up into northeast where kind of Olivia Savas, Rhiannon Pearce and others are, and then through the southwest, Nadia Clancy, and down into those Boothby areas. they were the class of 22. So 7 women that were elected in 2022, 6 of those 7 were in those seats. Those seats aren't in play now. Like, they're 3% and 5% margins, and they're expected to be north of 15 post-election night. So we have this completely different electorate kind of map, which is kind of why I said the West Wing stuff before, that even in the 2006 Rand Slam, as it was called, those target seats up the kind of pendulum, on current polling, they're just expected Labor gains, and Labor's shooting on top of the pendulum. So, looking at areas where we are now, Labor has a sitting member who has moved to the seat of Throne, which is now called Nadri. Clare in the middle of the federal seat of Grey. Labor hasn't held it since the 60s. Labor's got a very popular mayor running in Murray Bridge, Hammond. Need a shout out Hannah as the Hammond candidate in 2010, who started to turn the Titanic that has been a Liberal seat since the 1960s. Other things which you'd be aware of, Stephen, Bragg, which is in the middle of Sturt, Labor's never held. Hyson in the middle of Mayo, Labor's never held. Morsa in the middle of Boothby, they've not held since 79. So if you're talking about where are those seats that on current polling and on the federal booth numbers, Labor's probably winning by a couple of percent. These are seats that weren't even contemplated in 2006, and is where you really get that sense. We're talking Western Australia areas here, as opposed to any previous South Australian comparison.
I said on the January episode of the Feeney Files in the Probably Unanswerable Questions, will Mally break the primary vote result from WA and McGowan, and also the two-party preferred, which I went back and checked, and it is astronomically high. I actually fell off my seat when, oh my God, I forgot how much we won there. But it kind of feels like, I know the polling probably isn't indicating right now that it's on the cards, but I certainly feel like it's on the cards.
I know that, like you were saying, so the sitting members are just expected to hold their seats. They were talking about resourcing before. They're essentially not getting resourcing. They're elected members. They should have done the work by now to get re-elected with this, with this popularity. And so all of the targeting is getting redirected into these marginal seats. And we're running extraordinary candidates, really, in some of these. We've got Nick Bolkus's daughter, for example, running in Colton, and she's just some of these people. They're born to be politicians. Very disciplined. You would love that they've got extremely high door knocking targets, and that's what they're doing. They're just hitting the doors every single day, doing that direct voter contact, and not taking anything for granted.
I think since you've mentioned it, I was actually thinking about leaving it for next week and actually having a longer conversation about it. But it is remarkable, the quality of candidates that the party has pre-selected over the last couple of cycles, this regeneration, particularly of younger candidates and in particular younger women. Living across the border, I'm not getting a close-up sense of how they are on the stump or anything, but certainly if you have a bit of a sneak peek through their social media feed, incredibly articulate, incredibly values-driven, attractive, but politically attractive. And it just sort of it's such a contrast to the Liberal Party. You mentioned before, Matt, or how one of you guys said, there's only like a couple of women in the lower house of the Liberal Party. It's such a contrast with old guys versus, broadly speaking, young women running. And it talks about sort of, if Malinauskas is talking about sort of this new, young, fresh-faced South Australia, we're going places, and we want our young people to come and stay here, then your candidates need to reflect that hope and vision. And I just think there's no question here, but in this rant, but I just think it's really impressive what the party have done. And maybe that's down to, we talk about the machine and this sort of relationship between the left and the right factionally in terms of just working together to get shit done, and not, if we're going to have any fights, we do it quietly and not sort of wash our dirty linen in the public. It's paying dividends, I think, as when we get to election time.
Yeah, and I think probably a untold part of that in terms of the context that we're in, how small that 2018 loss to the Libs after 4 terms was, allows you to renew and attract people like Nadia Clancy to go and spend 9 months in a seat of elder held by a sitting Liberal member at the time. Like, we were within reach. And again, I think all these things have a counterpoint. All those women that won last time, Nadia, Lucy Hood, etc., if their margins are north of 15 this time, who's the half kind of attractive a conservative who's going to spend 90 grand in 9 months in 2030 trying to get a 15% margin back to 8?
Yeah.
Like, all these things become enormously structural problems.
Brutal. And then you build into what you said before, Matt, about the funding as well. It's just what a shit sandwich it is for the Tories. Okay, let's. I want to go to campaign content now. I need to get a sexier name for this segment other than campaign content. And if any South Australian companies want to come out there and sponsor some of these segments, please do. I'm more than happy to take your money.
Instead of donating to the political parties, donate to, yes, there you go.
Unionised coffee, I'll take your money.
Cooper's campaign content. Yeah.
Exactly. Billy's Pies. I've always loved Billy's Pies more than 4 and 20. Or Belfast. I don't know, actually. Anyway, so what we're going to do in this segment is we're going to – now I appreciate that this is mostly a audio-based medium, although we are on YouTube, but we're going to talk about some content, some campaign content, either a flyer or some digital content or a TV ad, and sort of discuss its merits. The one we're going to talk about today is an Instagram post, reel story that was on Ashton Hearn's account. We're going to put a link to it in the show notes. So if you want to quickly stop, watch it, come back, and then we can debrief if we can. Otherwise, we'll just go straight into it. Who wants to go first on their reflections on this? Maybe who feels comfortable about describing what it was first? I'm throwing you both under the bus here. I apologise, but who wants to take first swing at this?
I'll go first on the short version, and then Hannah can go off the long version. We live in a very weird world, and White House tweets on X, etc. Your first thought about looking this, it's utterly satire, and it's been set up by somebody who's trying to harm the Libs. It's a 1950s conservative, highly British voice talking about what a wonderful young sportswoman and mother Ashton is, and why that means that she's fit to lead the government. I follow this kind of Facebook group, it's like Adelaide Remember When or something, and it shows the kind of ads from the 50s and 60s. This is a bad version of that. Like, I don't want to tip into those that were involved in it, but it is extraordinary and gets worse from the start. And it takes quite a while to realise that is a legitimate political ad that was meant to be a good thing as opposed to a bad thing. But that's probably long enough. Hannah can go from there.
Hannah? I think a few people have mentioned Little Britain when it comes to this Instagram video. And I think, it's just who thought it up? Is this Ashton wanting to, I've got a great clip, Mally's really popular, here's how I can come across more like, well, I'm just like you, I'm a young mum, I'm a wife, I'm a netball player. But it's cringe. I don't think there's any other word for it.
And it's a voiceover that's the most extraordinary. Like, I think if you change the voice to the Instagram 50s English version of that kind of Snoop overlay that Instagram does, you can understand where it was coming from. But even the reverse and mocking of the conservative voice, it's extraordinary.
It feels like they're leaning into it, isn't it? It feels a bit flagellating and sort of saying, well, we're Tories, and so therefore let's go with this. Is that what they're trying to do?
I don't know if that's by choice, but I feel like Ashton is leaning into the Tory a lot in the crisp white suits and the slick back hair. It is very hard. I don't want to criticise a female leader on appearance, but just in everything, in the way she presents herself, she is very just run-of-the-mill Tory. That's the best way of describing her.
Hannah, I actually think that's the strongest part of it. And I mean that if I'm going to say something generous to it, I think, one, it's high quality. It's very, very well produced and well shot, and it's action and it's fast paced. And she looks great. Like, I actually think that she does look good. But it kind of, as you watch it, it starts with, like, I wonder, what do we actually learn about her in this self-indulgent minute 30? She's from the Barossa. She gets up early. She likes a long black with a glug. I don't even know what a glug is. And then there's a shot of her drinking an iced coffee, which isn't a long black, and it's not even a Farmers Union iced coffee. Like, get the branding right, for God's sake. She likes lollies, and she likes a kid, and she likes sport. That's beautiful. She's seen talking to 3 unidentifiable people. And if she's on this mission of where she says she's about affordability, community safety, and better health, whose health? She doesn't say. Where are the nurses? Where are the police? Where are the young family looking to buy their home? None of these people are in this shot. Otherwise, she looks lonely. She's spending all this time just walking and on her own and doing sort of odd things out on the street. And I can't work out who this is for, because it's so long. Who's going to watch this? Like, no one's going to watch this. Like, the ad guy that does most of the ads for the party across the Labor Party up and down this eastern seaboard, Darren Moss, would be looking at this and just cringing, because Darren just tries to get everything into 15 seconds, unskippable ads on YouTube, and just one message and that's it, and you'll see it 50,000 times. No one's going to watch this. It's so long and so indulgent.
If there was a view that this was to tie down a Tory base, Ashton's seat is enormously Conservative. It's kind of the area that Olsen had for a little while before he went to the Senate, before he became back. If this is a tied down the deeply Conservative people to show that I'm still your person in the face of this horrible union bloke, is a minute and a half on Insta the place where those voters are going to be seeing it? I think it's this, what was Brandis's line in the Australian Story, we had run out of new groups to offend. This feels like let's go target the children on Insta because it works for Mally, and just this extraordinarily confused execution. But I have enormous empathy for how bad it must be in there currently, faced with every challenge they have from every side, and maybe throwing things at the wall was what their idea was on the weekend.
By contrast, the Labor's Instagram is just incredible. They've got a separate one, Mally HQ, follow it if you don't already, and it's, like you said, 15 seconds. It's short, sharp, shiny, and focused on the quirkier bits. The dog at the press conference or something like that. Very, very shareable content, clearly for internal supporters only, to get people excited. So, lots to learn from Ali still.
My final reflection is it screams that the candidate really, really, really wanted this. Nobody could dissuade her of the concept. They all gave up, and then they just made it. Or she had good mates who is in an ad agency, and she said, I'll throw you a bone, and can we do an ad? And I give it a C-. Okay.
Well, because of us, it's going to get a lot more views. So
it actually is. I've got to check before we publish this episode how many views it's had. Anyway, okay, let's get to this week's categories. And for those of you who have not done this before, we have a bunch of categories where we ask our 2 guests to nominate, and it's just a way of kind of weaving in things that's happened throughout the week in the campaign that we haven't been able to talk about in the other topics. Normally we do a Tory with a typewriter or a tree Tory with a typewriter, but I don't think we've got any this week. Not a lot written about it, or they just love Mally, so we're just getting a great run, which is a weird place to be. Probably unanswerable questions. So this is for campaign moments that defy logic or strategy or common sense, or things that leave you asking, what were they thinking? Or maybe you just don't know the answer to it. Like I'm sort of thinking, when will we find out the answer to this, if at all, during the campaign? And Hannah, I think you've got one.
It's why on earth is the former Liberal leader charged with a drug conviction running again? I just don't understand. So for context.
Yeah, please.
When Stephen Marshall lost in 2022, David Spears took over the leadership. their white knight, and wasn't doing an absolute terrible job. And then wide-anting, undermining. He resigned in August 2024, saying he's had a gutful of being undermined and lacked the energy to fight on. A month later, a video emerges exclusively from the Advertiser showing him snorting white powder. He responds to that not with an admission, not with an apology, but rather to accuse the media of deep faking the video. He goes further in alleging a coordinated conspiracy against him by the police, by the government, saying he's so concerned that the state government power against somebody who was a political opponent. He went full tilt on this. Then admitted guilt in the court of law and was charged with community service and a fine, I believe. 1 year on, he's running in his former seat. It just defies logic to me. He basically has yet to really fully apologise. He sort of blamed it all on a mental breakdown, said after a year off he's better now, and aren't people best served by an independent?
So he's running as an independent, not as the endorsed Liberal candidate?
Yep.
Oh, the Liberals don't want a bar of him, and they've already come out saying they're preferencing him last on the ballot.
Yeah, right. That's good. Hot take of the week. So this is like the sharpest, spiciest, most unhinged opinion thrown in by the media or something you read in the socials. Could be a journal, could be a punter, could be a party insider.
It's me again, and it might not be too surprising that this week's hot take has come from One Nation's Corey Bernardi. He, on a visit to Adelaide University, was standing in front of a sign that said Nina Mani, which means hi, how are you in the local Ghana language. Went on his usual conservative rant about that it's symbolism, what a waste of time. But the hot take from him is that this sign with the First Nations language on it is trying to erase our history.
I have two more to add to that, and they're both Corey Bernardi ones.
Here we go.
Someone told me that apparently he was on Talkback Radio, and he went on this sort of like 10-minute rambling of his understanding of Islam and the Quran, and wanted to come off sounding like some sort of, theological academic from Adelaide Uni, and apparently it was just some of the most bizarrest bit of radio that Adelaide has heard in over 12 months. And my second one is him wanting to bring down the electricity prices by building a coal-fired power station, when someone told me that you're on track to have 100% renewables by like next year or in a couple of years' time.
Yeah, that's it. Corey will be making an appearance every week. I think at some point there should be some fashion watch about the champion of the battlers announced his candidacy in a $700 T-shirt, did a doorstop in front of a housing trust house last week in a designer polo shirt.
Brilliant.
I am certain.
Oh, the man of the people, isn't he? The battler.
I'm certain he'll get a gig every week. So let's save some up.
Save the good stuff. The next award is the Mel Meninga of My Head Award. So the candidate or the MP who flubbed an interview or a press conference or a media appearance so badly it became campaign canon. I don't think either of you guys have a Mel Meninga, do you? But I do. I'm nominating Corey Bernardi again.
Oh, there we go.
Maybe not putting it over his head, but just kind of should have done the brief. Apparently him and Antit were having a beer at the Exeter out the front on those concrete sort of chairs there, but they were drinking a Han Super Dry.
Oh yeah.
If you're in Adelaide, come on.
Yeah.
West End or Coopers, just get it right. And Corey's meant to be. He's from South Australia, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. They both are. Yeah, they know.
Yeah, kind of PAC old scholar, but no. So for those who are the old kind of South Australian politics, it was the poor man's version of the Premier's photo with the now Premier's photo with former Premier Jay Weatherill before he became Premier, when they got papped having a coffee outside Chianti, which then led to Jay becoming Premier. So it was a Timu version of that.
Nice. I'm also just predicting that potentially because I didn't know about Chris McDermott, former Crows captain, running. I'm putting him in the Mel Meninga Watch This Space nomination category because there's a good chance that poor old Chris may find himself in.
He already has. So he already has. So when he was announced, he said, "I'm going to run as the fair go to the former One Nation, run as the fair go candidate for Dunstan, which is middle of Norwood, fair way away from Glenelg, where he was captain before being Crows captain, which was all a little bit weird." And there was a whole lot of chat at the time saying, "Why would you do that? That sounds utterly madness. If he had a crack at the upper house, he might be a chance." Somebody must have told him that because a week later he said, "Bugger it, we'll kick out the person who's number one on the fair go Ledgeco ticket because Corey has, and he's now running number one on the Ledgeco ticket." But I was in Port Lincoln last week doing some campaign stuff, and he was up there and was enormously popular and spent 3 days in a seat, which is about 1.5% of the state's vote.
By all accounts, he's a lovely guy.
He is absolutely lovely guy. I worked at the Sunday Bar with him years ago. So.
Yeah, right. And played for the Bays, which is my SANFL team. So,
Go the Double Blues.
Go Double Blues. This is Labor.
Are you both Sturt fans?
Yeah.
Hey, it's soon to be Labor territory.
Well, we'll get to
We're
that.
with Pembo, yeah. We're with Pembo, you're with Kate. So,
yeah.
Bays.
Matt Ellis is actually the person that dragged me.
Absolutely. I would. Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Oh, no, this is getting very local, this podcast, which is very, very Adelaide too, by the way. We're just naming people randomly who live in it. Marginal seat Hunger Games. So for the electorate receiving an over-the-top amount of campaign love, sort of think repeat visits, multiple policy drops and more volunteers than voters. Do you guys have anyone? I had – you go, Matt, you go first.
Yeah, so I said I would probably go back to the Hammond stuff before and kind of say, the seat of Murray Bridge, there was a mad former Lib who became Speaker called Peter Lewis, who held it until 2006. All of the kind of meatworks left over time, or at least certainly kind of shrunk over time. It's got a $100 million kind of undisclosed infrastructure fund promised by Labor. The Libs are out doing everything. There's quite good independent who got quite close last time, and it has had love and attention that it never would have had previously, and shows how kind of far down the how far or up the pendulum that we currently are.
Hannah, jealous, disappointed, wish you ran again?
Too soon.
I'll leave it. I'll leave it for the experts.
I've heard rumours Bragg as well is maybe getting a little bit of love on the marginal seat Hunger Games too.
Yeah, so I think something that probably wasn't ideal for Labor this week. Alice Rolls, who's running in Donnelly this time, who's an extraordinary candidate, ran in the Bragg by-election when Vicky Chapman left, and there was a little bit of kind of campaign material saying, here's the Bragg local stuff from last week, here's the Donnelly local stuff from this time. Rick Saar is the Labor candidate who has been a number of times. If you look at that polling, it's simply, that's how far down the list they end up losing. The Premier did a shopping centre visit at Burnside the other day. Hannah might want to add into that. But yeah, it is, every seat in the metro area is in play. Federal Libs won 2 out of 329 booths election night. That shows what the lay of the land is.
To explain what Burnside is, it's Burnside.
Yeah.
I think that sums it up. These are the areas we're playing in the marginal hunger seats games. Like it's just all held seats are held. You're going out, you're getting seats off the pendulum.
Your Labor volunteers will find themselves knocking some very, very lovely homes with lovely nature strips and very green gardens.
It's Labor heartland of Sturt now. We mustn't forget. They've had the outstanding Labor service of a local member for 9.5 months now, and the tide has turned.
That's right. Bet it in. I was also going to ask you about I was going to have a subcategory for the Stubby poll Hunger Games about who's got the most Caulfield's up on Stubby polls, but now we can't. I'm so disappointed about that.
It hurts me. Much like how this next generation girls aren't wearing high heels to nightclubs, they're wearing sneakers. I feel like they needed to feel our pain and get up a ladder.
When they're all dressing like Carolyn Bessette as well from watching Love Story. Okay, and the last category, the In This Economy Award for a policy announcement that completely ignores the prevailing cost of living mood and swings for the fences anyway. Matt, what do you got?
So, it has been quite a high kind of promising campaign from where we are, and whilst kind of a lot of the dollars have been targeted at cost of living. I had the kind of free public school thing, which Minister Burke handed me outside the primary school this morning, which kind of 150 mil over 4 years. I was looking at social media on the weekend and saw a Adelaide City Football Club, soccer club announcement with the treasurer holding a cheque. I thought, 600 grand, okay, that's a fair bit. Then I looked again and there were 6 zeros instead of 5, and I realised it was $6 million. And I thought, whoa, okay, that's a decent amount of money for junior sport. So no, even I was caught by the announcement being 10 times more than made sense at first glance.
So there's no cost of living in those parts of the electorate.
It's about making junior sport more affordable with the Malinauskas government sports vouchers on safer playing fields and more change rooms for women's sport.
Beautiful. So for folks listening next week, if you do want to if you want to send us in any nominations for those particular categories, please do, and we will aim to read them out on the show. Last category or last sort of question is who won the week. I'll give it to you, Hannah, first. Who do you think won this week just gone?
Hands down, Peter Malinauskas. He just campaigned very well. It was housing policy week this week, and every day a great targeted housing policy. Often what seems to be happening here is that a Labor Party policy will supersede a previous Liberal policy promise. So it just leaves them no room to move. So Peter Malinauskas this week.
Good job, Matt.
Yeah, there was a Facebook Live that he did Sunday night where he kind of looked, tired after the week and was rolling through, here's what started on Sunday, campaign launch. And he got halfway through and you were kind of lost by just how much had happened during the week. Also, talking about kind of bench strength before, like the Libs are hopping up, copping an attack from Minister Koutsantonis, having Minister Boyer as kind of campaign spokesperson clearing the deck. And then, the premiers going out doing the mobbed by staff at trade schools being loved. Like it's been, extraordinary campaign execution at the same time. And, as I was saying before, having a, upper house minister outside of school handing out DLs in a seat which is going to be 15%. This is a machine that, can't stop, won't stop. So
love it. And nor will we. We'll be back next week to recap the second last week of the campaign. What is happening next week? Is there a debate? What's the main thing we'll talk about next week?
So there are 2 different debates next week. There's a Sky advertiser debate, and then there's a SA Chamber of Commerce and Press Club and ABC, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And Mikkel's got some exciting things happening as well. So.
I've got former ministers Kate Ellis and Christopher Pine giving us their hot takes next week as well. So that should be very interesting, particularly from Christopher. But next week, business as usual, got a public holiday on the Monday, which is always interesting right before an election. But we've actually got only the 1 week, the 6 days of early voting. So next week is business as usual. No votes would be cast yet.
But you'll have postals being sent out in regional areas, and I think a very strong question in terms of leaving people with that, in a world where One Nation hasn't done a deal with the Libs, how are they getting how to votes out at the same time as postals if they're not telling people what they're doing yet?
Nightmare.
It's a very good point. We will know preferences by next week.
So lots to talk about. Very good. Before I let you two go, to everyone else, remember that we're doing a Social Democratic listener survey. We want to know what you think about the show. If you do complete the survey and hand us over your name and email, you'll go into the draw to win a trip to Adelaide, of all places, for the ALP National Conference in July.
There you go. It's all happening.
It is. And you'll be able to come to an episode, a live taping of the Feeney Files details of Jesse McCrone as well. So flights and accommodation. If you live in Adelaide and you win, we'll fly you to Melbourne to come to our Melbourne version. We'll do one in the lead up to our state election. So please, it's just a small sort of incentive to complete the survey, but please complete the survey. We really, really appreciate it. I also appreciate Hannah MacLeod. Thank you so much for your time today. I look forward to talking to you next week.
Thank you.
And Matt Clemow, as always, look forward to talking to you next week as well.
And we might have some gamble responsibly seat odds up by next week, and we can roll through those as well.
I'm amazed that you didn't bring it up in this episode, so I'm looking forward to hearing that next week. As are some of the people who listen to the show like a punt.
The only market that's up, Labor, is $1 to be re-elected. Yeah. It's the only sports bet market that's up. So,
all right. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you all next week for our second episode of the South Australian Election Campaign Review. Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like the show, then join our Patreon community for early and ad-free access to each episode. We regularly take questions and comments from our Patreon members, so get in there if you want to have your say. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.